Okay, now for the real fun stuff. If you have never used Azure before, you're in for a real treat. This is called Portal, and we're going to create a VM. And like I mentioned before in the slideshow, we're going to create a VM using this graphical portal, then using PowerShell and the Azure command line. The latter two methods, PowerShell and the Azure command line, are automated ways to create a VM. There's a very popular fourth way to automate creating a VM in Azure, and I'll let you think about that one. Maybe Google around while we're waiting on the portal to do its stuff, and I'll give the answer at the very end. What I did here was, and we'll cover this later in later labs, but I made a custom dashboard, and it is called a Create VM Portal. So remember, one of the things we need is a resource group. And while we could create the resource group while we create the VM, I'm going to create the resource before I begin to create the VM. I'm going to say add. And you're going to pick your subscription. I just have the one. I'm going to call it Azure Guy RG. And notice there's lots of different regions. There's some strategic options to pick the region you want. Like if you're doing a redundancy, you want to pick a pair region. We're not going to worry about that for now. At default is Central US. I'm going to pick Central US. And just say create. I passed validation, which is excellent. I'll click on create, and this should not take long at all. I'm going to say pin to my dashboard. So if I go to my dashboard now, I'm going to hit the refresh, and I should see my resource group. There it is, Azure RG. So now I'm going to create a resource, meaning the VM. And VMs are under compute. You'll just learn these things as you go on. And we'll pick, we got Windows Server here, Windows Clients, Windows Server down here. Let's pick this one, see what happens. Yeah, we got small disk 2008. We don't like that one. We want Windows 2016 Data Center. Still says small disk. Let's see what happens when we get to our big screen. They really added lots of images over the last few months. You really have to watch what you're doing. All right, resource group. Remember I said we could create it while we're creating the VM, but I decided to create it before. So I'm going to click on my drop down, pick resource group, machine name, remember 15 characters. So I'm going to call it Azure Azure Guy VM Portal. Is that going to be too many? Yes. About port. We passed all validation. I'm not sure why I picked Western Europe. That's kind of odd, but we'll go to Central US. And it still has small disk, and it's thinking. I wonder if it's still updating. Yep, still small disk. Click the drop down. Do we have 2016? Yes, so I'll just choose that. There you go, I like that better. It's thinking again. Just making sure, notice this check mark went away. Just making sure everything's available. And it shows a very small size. This would be okay, but we're going to log into this VM, and one CPU, they're really, really slow. Good thing is they're really, really cheap. But we're not going to keep this VM around for very long, so we're actually going to upgrade it just a little bit to a version 2 DS2, which gives us 2 CPUs and 14 gigs of RAM, 7 gigs of RAM. Much faster to log in. Select. That changed our size. Username. Say speed. Give it a password. Hopefully I typed these two the same. And it looks like, I don't know which one I got wrong. So let's start again. Looks like I got the first one wrong. Looks like they're all green now. And we're going to allow RDP port 3389. It's not an accepted practice because you generally don't want to remote desktop to your VMs via RDP on their public IP address. Because basically what we're doing is you guys could RDP to this once if you knew the public IP address. You couldn't log in because you don't know my my username, but not my password. But you could probably get in eventually. And we'll learn further down the labs how to not log into the public IP address. Don't have a Windows license. Notice I could click review and create there, but we're gonna go to disks. And it defaults to premium. That costs more money, so I'm going to go to standard for a couple of reasons. One, save it on cache, and then to actually point out something here. Notice, if you don't choose premium, you don't get the 99.9 uptime. They have a brand new thing called Enable Ultra, which is in preview. You will not be tested anything in preview. But while we're here, let's just learn a little thing, one or two things about disks. And I think this is it. There we go. I'm trying to get too scroll happy here. And here's our 4 different kinds. Notice that Ultra is in preview, so you won't be tested on it. And notice the different max ops you get. And some of the things, even they're not going to be covered on their Ultra SSD. Some interesting things about it, I think, is limitations. And this is a general rule of thumb, as most previews, you shouldn't use it in production. Because it may never go to general, anything in preview may never go to general availability. That's one reason not to use it. And it's not supported yet. Remember, if you try to use these now, it does not support Azure backup. So you can't back up your VM. Does not support availability sets. So, and they're only supported on some higher end VMs. That's one reason why it's grayed. So I think we're done with that. Let's minimize. We're going to go standard and go next to networking. And you remember one of the things we mentioned in the slideshow is we need a VNet and a subnet. And Azure was cool enough to auto-create those for us. And we'll talk more about how to create these manually when we get into the networking section. But for now, we're just going to let Azure do its thing. And there's lots of stuff to talk about here, but for now, it's beyond scope. Click on management. Again, we could have just clicked here and been done. But I just thought it'd be nice to go through all the screens. And boot diagnostics, I'm going to turn off. And I don't want this to shut off anytime soon. And we're going to say review and create. Hopefully we will pass validation. And we did. So I'm going to click on create. And it's going to take a good 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll see you back in 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, we are back. Our VM was created successfully, which is excellent. I'm going to say go to my dashboard and let's do a refresh, upload, download, edits, share, full screen. I did have to do this one. And there it is. So let's click on it. And you see we have some stuff going on, which is great. Now we want to connect. So we'll click here. Lots of ways we could connect, but we're going to do it a kind of straightforward way. We're going to say going on 3389, download, open. Connect. And I think we called it speed. Well, hopefully we have the right password. And we do. That would have been a bummer. We'll give the VM a minute or two to boot up, but I'll pause. Okay, as I mentioned a few times now, we're going to create a VM in the next lab via PowerShell. And if you never heard of PowerShell or heard about it, here's a very simple PowerShell command. And if you don't know what PowerShell is, it's a scripting language that Microsoft created this is a very simple definition, but to help you automate and administer Windows PCs. Obviously it goes beyond because we're never doing Azure, but we're actually administering a Windows PC. So we're going to do what this command does here is it's going to install IIS and the management tools. We could have gone through Server Manager to do all this, roles and services, but this is faster. Going to pause the video. Okay, you can see it installed successfully. One thing I forgot to do was get my public IP address. So I'm going to have to close out of here, sign out. Get my public IP address. You'll see why here in a second. I'm going to connect differently this time. Remote desktop. Oh, look at that. It's something I never noticed before. Let's do this. See what happens. I believe this will get me there. Yep. So all we're going to do is just to make sure the PowerShell thing worked is open up